In this video, I'm going to show you how to solo over the 2-5-1 chord progression using arpeggios on your guitar. Arpeggios are a great tool for soloing because they allow you to outline all the notes in each chord you play over, producing very melodic lines in your compositions and in your improvisations. Hi, I'm Simon Candy from acousticguitarlessonsonline.net, and today's lesson is all about using arpeggios to solo with on your guitar. For this, we'll be using the 2-5-1 progression, which is the most common chord progression in jazz, but is also very prominent in other styles and genres of music too. This progression contains one of each main chord type: minor seventh, a dominant seventh, and a major seventh chord. We'll be in the key of C major today, so our 2-5-1 progression will consist of a D minor 7 chord, a G7 chord, and a C major 7 chord. I'll first show you arpeggio patterns for each of these chords before running you through a number of very effective arpeggio exercises that will train you to be able to visualize the inner workings of each arpeggio shape on the fretboard, so you can switch between these with ease. Okay, so to begin, we've got a 2-5-1 in the key of C. So that's a D minor 7, G7, and C major 7 chords that we're dealing with here. So we need an arpeggio shape for each one of those chords. And while we can play those arpeggio shapes all over the fretboard, and the bigger picture for you would be that you do want to learn all positions to play any single arpeggio. For the purpose of today's video, we are going to be playing each shape in the same position. Okay, and you'll see why that becomes important shortly. For the D minor 7 arpeggio, this is the shape I'm going to play, starting from the root note on the 5th string of the D, and we move up this arpeggio shape for a D minor 7 chord. And if you like, you can include notes from the arpeggio that exist on the lower string as well, rather than just going from the root note on the 5th string. It's always good to learn all the notes in the position, not just from the root note. But if we're technically talking about a root 5 arpeggio, then perhaps we'll start from the root note on the 5th string, but we can then include the other notes that belong to the arpeggio on the lower strings. So that's our shape for D minor. Now, in the same position, we need a shape for G7. So we're going to use this shape. This is a very common root 6 dominant 7th arpeggio shape. Okay, and for our C major 7, the 1 chord, we're going to use, of course, a major 7 arpeggio, and it will be this one. And like the D minor 7, it's a root 5, so there are some additional notes that we could play on the 5th and 6th string that are below the root note C. Okay, so there are also notes that can be included in the shape. Okay, so we've got the C major 7, and if we want, we can come down to the 5th. Okay, so there are 3 shapes, and notice they're all on top of each other. They're all in the same position, and that's what we want for what we're going to be doing in today's lesson. Okay, so the first step here in starting to relate these shapes to each other on the fretboard is to simply play up and down each shape back to back. I'll play the D minor 7. And if I want, I can include the lower, part of the arpeggio as well. Then from there, I'm going to go into the G dominant 7th arpeggio and go up and down it. And then I'm going to go into the C major 7 arpeggio. You might notice I made a slight alteration with my C major 7 arpeggio here. Instead of playing the E on the 7th at the 7th fret on string 5, I'm playing it at the 2nd fret on string 4. It's not a massive difference, it's not a massive change, but it just keeps it a little bit more in the position. So before I played it here, now I'm playing it here. Okay, so there's just a slight variation there. The next step, once you're familiar with that, once you can do that, is to go up one arpeggio and down the other. So, for example, I start with my D minor 7 and I go up. And when I get to the top note in that arpeggio, I then go to the top note in the next shape I want, which is the G dominant 7th, and I come down G7. And then I go up C major 7. Then once I'm at C major 7 at the top, I go back to D minor, and then this time I'm going to come down D minor. I went up it before. Then I go to G dominant 7th, and now I'm going up it instead of down. And then I'll come down C major 7. So you're going up one arpeggio, coming down the other. And if you do them back to back, and when you get to C major, you go back to D minor, you'll find the ones that you went ascending on the first time around are the ones you descend, and the ones you were descending become the ones that you ascend. Okay, so it's just sort of vice versa. And it's a great way to start connecting the arpeggios, not only at their lowest point from, like the root notes, but to also be able to connect them from up the top as well. So you're kind of taking care of the bookends of the arpeggio here. Okay, you're connecting from both the lowest point in the arpeggio when you're going from one arpeggio shape to another, and the highest point in each arpeggio shape. We now want to be able to connect from one shape to the next at any point within the arpeggio shape. So the inner parts, if you like, the inner workings, we want to see how they all relate to each other, so that at any point within one arpeggio, I can easily and smoothly switch to the next. There's a very, very useful exercise from which to build this skill, okay? And I'm going to break it down for you here. And I'm going to begin with two of our chords. So we've only got one change to deal with. It's going to be easier than trying to negotiate all three at this point. We have our D minor 7, that's the first chord in the arpeggio, of course, that we've got for that, and the G7, okay? And I'm going to practice changing in between those two shapes from all sorts of different points within each arpeggio shape. What we're going to bring to our exercise here is time. I'm going to spend 1 bar on each chord. Okay, 1 bar on each chord. So we're going to now put an actual time to what we're doing here rather than just go up and down shapes freely. And I'm going to give each note a value of a crotchet, a quarter note. So for each beat of our bar, I play a note from the arpeggio. Okay, that's the second thing. So a bar on each chord and the value of a quarter note for each note that I play in the arpeggio. So in other words, I'm going to play 4 notes from one arpeggio shape before switching to the next arpeggio shape. Okay, but here's the challenge, and I'll just sort of slow it down here first to explain this. And that is, you're going to start, let's say on D minor, and you're going to play 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now at this point, the bar is up. It's time to change, because here comes G7, and the nature of arpeggios is you need to change when the chord changes. But I'm not through the whole shape here, so wherever I am at the time that the chord change is going to occur in the current shape, I've got to switch to the next shape, but not only to the next shape, but to the next note available from where I am in that shape, whether it be the next note up or the next note down. It doesn't really matter. We just want to go to the closest note in the next arpeggio shape. So if I'm playing my D minor 7 here, and I play the first 4 notes for each beat, then I can either go to this note in my G dominant 7th and continue now up G major 7, G dominant 7th, sorry. Or after playing those first 4 notes of D minor 7, and knowing I had to change now to G dominant 7th, I could also just go down 1 fret. That puts me onto the 3rd or the B note in the G dominant 7th arpeggio, and continue down G dominant 7th. Okay, so you get the idea. You've got to switch wherever you are at the time that the chord change is going to occur. Wherever you are in the current arpeggio, you want to switch to the next one of the chord coming up, but not, you're not going to do what a lot of people do, and that is finish in the arpeggio and then go to the root note of the next arpeggio, and then finish and then go to the root of the next arpeggio. That sounds very predictable and very obvious when you hear that in playing. We just want to have a very nice smooth connection to the next available note in the arpeggio coming up from where we are in the current one. So it sounds like a bit of a mouthful when you explain it, but again, let me demonstrate a little more for you so we help reinforce this concept. Again, I play 4 notes from D minor 7, and then I go to G7, and I go down. Now, after 4 notes in G7, it's back to D minor. So the next note I play has got to be from the D minor arpeggio. And then, of course, I've got to stay in the D minor arpeggio until I've played 4 notes, because 1 note to each beat that were on the bar with the arpeggio. And then I've got to switch to G7 again. And after 4, back to D minor. And then back to G. Then D minor. And G. And D minor. And G. And D minor. The lower part. And G. And D minor. And G. So every bar I'm switching from D minor to G7 and back to D minor again, but at all different points, because when the bar comes up, I'm at different points throughout my arpeggio. That's the challenge. And this is challenging to do, don't get me wrong, but it's really, really good to do, because then you start to be able to see exactly where you are. When it's time to change, you'll be able to change easily between the two. Okay, so that's the challenge there. Okay, now a very beneficial or effective way to be able to visualize any two shapes, like I've just run you through, arpeggio shapes on your fretboard, and this is a little bit of a secret, because it's not. I don't see too many people doing this, and to be honest, I didn't really do this when I was learning the shapes so much, certainly not in the early years. I think I've done more of this through my teaching initially, but as a student you should do this, and that is take a bit of fretboard diagram paper, and if you've got none, you can download some. There's plenty online, or just take a pen and 6 horizontal lines and some vertical lines, and there's your fretboard paper, right? Fretboard diagram, and you plot out the arpeggio shapes on the fretboard. You plotting them out, looking at your guitar and seeing where they are, and then dot them out on the fretboard like you see in educational material, will help you visualize them in your mind. For anything you want to visualize on the fretboard, plot it out on fretboard paper regularly. Not so you keep it all nice, you can put it on your wall so you can see it, and it's always there to kind of get imprinted in your brain. That's not a bad idea, but we do it to go through the process of doing it. So once you've done it and you go and study it again, and you're working with it, write it out again. See if you can write it out without looking at your fretboard, without your guitar inside. So that way you're visualizing it in your mind, and you're looking at the blank fretboard diagram, and you're plotting out the scale shape, or the arpeggio shape, or the chord shape, or whatever it might be that you're working on. Writing things out is really, really beneficial to visualizing them in your mind, to see them on the fretboard. So that's the first thing. In the context of what we're doing here, what is great, and you'll see a diagram come up on the screen now in a moment, and that is if we plot out both arpeggio patterns that we're connecting together here on the one fretboard diagram. So in other words, you're going to have the D minor arpeggio shape, and overlaid on top of that will be the G. Do you notice anything there? Well, when you do it, and you might not notice this if you don't do this, there are common notes between the two shapes. Both shapes have the D note, and both shapes have the F note. It's pretty handy to know, because if you hit any one of those notes and it's time to change, well, you're already in the shape. Okay, so they share common notes, and of course there are notes that are different too, else we'd be playing the same thing. What you do is you plot it out like you see on the screen here, but you write it out yourself, and then you put it in front of you, so you can see it, and you play your arpeggios, and you're looking at that diagram, and you're looking at it from either the perspective of D minor 7, if you're playing D minor 7, and when it's time to change, you can see exactly where you are in that shape, and you can see where the next note, either above or below that note that you're on currently, is for the next arpeggio. Okay, so it's doing the same thing we were just talking about before, but this is a really effective way to train it. Okay, you write it out on the fretboard paper, then you have it in front of you as you go about doing the exercise of changing from one shape to the next. okay? And what will happen is, after a little while, you won't need that anymore. What you're seeing on the paper is here, okay, in your mind. And when you look at a fretboard, you can see it as well, okay? But you won't ever need to. I can't see my fretboard right now from where I am when I'm sitting with the guitar. I don't want to, because I have it on an odd angle and it's no good, okay? So, but you'll be able to see what you're visualizing in your mind. That's the key, okay? So really, really effective way to help visualize the shapes on the fretboard. If you like the ideas we covered in today's video, then you'll love this ebook audio from my Jazz Concepts for Acoustic Guitar series titled Arpeggios. In this ebook, you will learn exactly what arpeggios are, how to visualize them on your fretboard, and several ways to use them in your guitar playing. I will run you through 3 key major arpeggio shapes and 3 key minor arpeggio shapes, and how each of these relate to each other on the fretboard, so you can easily access them in your playing. Not only will you learn the conventional way of applying arpeggios to your guitar playing, I will also show you how to instantly multiply your soloing possibilities with each arpeggio through arpeggio superimposition. This sounds complicated, but it's super simple. And I will not only show you how all this stuff works on your fretboard, but also explain it to you so you can understand the theory behind it all. So click the link in the description below this video and download your free ebook audio, Jazz Concepts for Acoustic Guitar Arpeggios. You'll have it in your inbox within minutes. Let me know in the comments section what acoustic guitar topics you'd like to see covered in future videos. I read every comment and I would love to hear your suggestions. If you like this video, then hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit the notification bell button so you know when I've released a new video. This is Simon Candy from acousticguitarlessonsonline.net. As always, thanks for watching this video. I appreciate your time very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.